Don't some immigrants get Social Security for 7 years if they are asylees? No. Although this one has a very clear antecedent in its misconception. Social Security is a separate program from Supplemental Security Income. They both give cash in certain circumstances to elderly or disabled individuals, but Social Security is a completely separate program, and SSI is a much smaller program, has a totally different financing and eligibility. It's not related to Social Security, and it's much smaller in benefits. It's basically like a cash welfare program for very poor elderly and disabled individuals. You can get SSI as a non-citizen if you meet like a pretty long list of specific conditions, and of those, uh, certain humanitarian non-citizen qualified aliens who are eligible for supplemental security income uh, do have a 7 year period. Why seven? It's because it's assumed that that's how long it'll take them to become naturalized, and then they'll no longer be a non-citizen beneficiary. They'll be a citizen beneficiary. So I will explain Social Security versus supplemental security income, and then I will explain how immigrants get it. But let me first kind of head off at the pass any notion that there is a massive amount of immigrants on SSI, like, oh, well, maybe they don't get Social Security, but a bunch of them are on this elderly welfare. Also, not true. There were about 365,000 non citizens on SSI. They get $500 a month on average. And that number, 365,000, has been dropping for about 20 years. The number of non citizens on SSI has been consistently falling over time. So there's no crisis, there's no spike, there's no explosion, there's not even an increase. It's been falling. And the majority of the people, who are non citizens on SSI getting $500 a month, 76% of them are over 65. A lot of them are on Social Security. They just don't have enough qualified work to get that high of a benefit. And most of them are women. So it's not kind of this like large exploding group of people. Social Security is Social Security. You have to pay into the program for 40 quarters of authorized work, that you have a Social Security number issued in your name that guarantees you benefits. Those payroll tax contributions not only qualify for you for benefits, they pay for future beneficiaries and current beneficiaries. It is a closed system. You're only eligible if you pay in via the payroll tax, and the amount that you get is based on the amount that you put in, including the number of years you worked. And there's no means test, there's no income test, there's no nothing. It's just a pay in, pay out. It's based on your earnings. Supplemental security income is completely different. It is paid for out of general revenue, the income tax that we all pay. It goes to very poor individuals who are also elderly, blind, or disabled and have very little in resources. So the test for SSI, a supplemental cash benefit, is that, one, elderly, blind, or disabled. Two, almost no money coming in. So for the most part, Social Security would count as money, and the vast majority of Social Security recipients would get way too much from Social Security to be eligible for SSI. And you can't have any substantive resources. This is an asset test. This asset test often ignores your primary residence and one vehicle, but you can't have anything in the bank. No savings, no retirement account. It has to be less than $2,000 in countable resources. That's almost nothing. So not only do you have very little coming in, you have almost nothing in the bank, then you qualify for SSI. Those are the differences between the two programs. Now how non-citizens get SSI is even more complicated. First, they have to meet that whole test of elderly, blind, disabled, low income, low resources. Then they have to meet a bunch of specific non-citizen tests. So the first is that they have to be a qualified alien. That is what the program calls it. That's not like something I made up. That is their nomenclature. You have to be a qualified alien, which excludes anyone undocumented. It excludes non-immigrants. So if you're here on like a tourist visa, a temporary visa, you have temporary status. It also excludes anyone who is waiting for asylum status, as well as DACA. None of them are included as qualified aliens, quote unquote. Now, of qualified aliens, depending on what type of qualified alien you are, you might have other conditions that have to be met. So, for example, if you're a legal permanent resident and you are applying for SSI, you have to have waited 5 years from entry or change of status, and you have to have 40 quarters of work as measured by Social Security for either you or sometimes your spouse. If you are being sponsored in your immigration process, your sponsor can't have too much money, either in income or assets. And then you have the humanitarian cases, which can be eligible for supplemental security income, but only for 7 years. And that includes asylees, refugees, victims of human trafficking, certain victims of domestic violence, and then kind of country specific non-citizens that come. So one example is the Amerasian immigrants. These are people born in specific countries in Asia between 1950 and 1982 who have an American father. These are sometimes referred to as GI babies. These were kids that service members had when they were serving overseas. They're eligible to come in and have SSI for 7 years. The 7 year limit is meant to approximate the naturalization process timeline so that you can get SSI while you're waiting to be naturalized, and then you move from a non-citizen to a citizen SSI beneficiary, which is probably one of the reasons why SSI for non-citizens has been declining over time. People, switch their status. There have been moves over the past maybe like 20 years to try and increase the time limit because naturalization takes a lot longer than 7 years. It was 5, it was raised to 7. Bush wanted it at 8. I think Obama had it at 11 before it dropped back down to 7, but there's widespread understanding that 7 years does not approximate the naturalization process. So some elderly, disabled, very poor, low resource non-citizens who are qualified to receive supplemental security income, can and do lose benefits for a period of time before they can reapply as naturalized citizens.